Now, let's introduce our panelists for tonight. First, I want to introduce Sarah. You can give him a hand. Ryan. Debbie. Shree. Sharon. Jen. And Kevin. I know she came up a little bit earlier, but I also just now want to just introduce our host for this evening, and that is none other than Erin Patrice. So give her a warm welcome as she comes in.
You guys sit down, get comfortable. Let's go. No, you guys have a seat. Oh, are you guys excited like I am? Yes, 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 yes. Awesome, awesome. Well, again, I'm so appreciative of everyone that came out tonight. We have a full house, and I'm so grateful for you all for seeing the importance in this conversation. So tonight we're going to talk about what about the children? And I want to kind of do a quick opening. I think that many of us can agree that no matter where we sit politically, we agree that children are one of the most vulnerable and sacred demographics of our society and should be protected and cared for relentlessly. No rock should be left unturned when it comes to advocating for and educating ourselves and our communities about the importance of protecting our babies because they grow up and they become us. Big humans with big stuff we must carry. I want to add again that some of this conversation may make you uncomfortable. If you need to step out or leave at any time, we understand and we support that. With that said, let's have the conversation. So, panelists, y'all feel okay?
Okay. Good to go.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. So I want to just jump right into it and just talk about some of the different types of child abuse that we see. Typically, a lot of times people will think about maybe the physical abuse, right? But there's many different types of abuse that take place with our children. So does anybody want to kind of start and just talk about some of the different type of abuses that they've seen, experienced, encountered? I feel like you want to say something, Ryan. I see, Ryan, go ahead, jump into that.
So yeah, you mentioned physical abuse, obviously being very first and foremost. We hear a lot about that. The next one that I would say, which is right up there at the top, would be sexual abuse. Unfortunately, there's a lot of that going on. We also see emotional and mental abuse as well. So that's everything that I work with, or I see a lot of that.
And then there's neglect. So those are the 4 types of abuses.
Awesome, thank you. So what are some signs? Because oftentimes people, when you have these conversations, they had no idea, right? These are people that, I know someone personally that it was happening right in their home, right? They had no idea that it was happening to their child. What are some signs that people can look for in regards to these different types of abuses? Go ahead.
Okay, well, I'll go.
Go for it.
So the interesting thing about abuse, the 4 types of abuses, is that there can be a plethora of signs or there can be no signs. Mm-hmm. So physical abuse, when there is bruising, burns, bites, patterned marks on a child, especially under the age of 4 months when they're not mobile, those are ones that you absolutely call into question if there are bruises on a baby, because how would they get them? But you also have, when it comes to something like sexual abuse, someone said to me a few weeks ago, death is public, but abuse is private. We know about the abuse when death often occurs, or it's been such a huge thing that it's caught attention to the media. But oftentimes abuse happens behind doors, and because it may have happened to a child for so long, it's absolutely normal in their world. They may feel abnormal, but it's something that normally happens. So you can have a child who is abused, who is an extremely high achiever. They show up all the time. They cross all the T's and dot all the I's. They are very much a people pleaser because they're dealing with worth issues. So you can have the extreme where there's a pregnancy and a child under the age of 13 and you got to ask why. Or, there's a sexually transmitted disease. Those things are pretty clear, but the things that aren't clear, the thing we would always say, the best way to pick up on some of those signs, the best arm or defense our children will have will be our relationships with them. Children who have a safe adult in their life they're more likely to trust an infrastructure or feel safe where they can disclose. If a child doesn't have that, there's a good chance they will live with it. We know the average age of disclosure is 52 years old. Average age of disclosure is 52 years old, and there are 42 million adult survivors of abuse. So that tells us that we as safe adults, those who have children in their sphere of influence, if you can create a space of safety, there may be a better chance that a child will disclose so that they can get out of the hell that they're living in.
Yeah, yeah. I appreciate you saying the part about safe adult too, because we also know that some children could have that and still not say anything, right? Because they're threatened, where they say, if you tell someone I hurt your mother and things of that nature, right? So, but having that gives us a higher chance of them telling their stories, right? Anybody else want to add anything to that?
Yeah. Sure, I could add something to that.
And then you go next.
Can you hear me? Yeah, okay. So being I'm a licensed clinical social worker, but prior to having my own practice, I spent many years in public education. Mm-hmm. And one thing that is often a sign is that if you have a child, and this is not always the case, right? Sure. It's not always going to fit every child that this is the case. But if you have a child that is often dysregulated, if they're living in an environment where their primary caregivers are not offering them a sense of felt safety, in other words, they cannot turn to the people that they live with when they are having a bad day, when things are happening to them, or somebody that is maybe neglecting them and is not interacting with them or interacting with them harshly, their way of dealing with the world and making sense of the world is going to be totally different than what you might see in a child that is brought up in a home where they are surrounded by unconditional love and guidance and concern. Mm-hmm. And so what that might look like in a situation similar to public education or private education, but a school type setting or any type of group setting, is they might be quickly activated by a seemingly innocuous situation. And it might throw you for a loop and you might say, where did this come from? Where did this reaction come from? And
so I'm sorry, when you say activated, because I want to make sure we're
Yes.
speaking so people that are not
Absolutely.
in the field
Yep.
can understand what we're saying. So
Thank you for that.
Yes.
Thank you for that. So when I say activated, it's kind of exactly what it sounds like. So you might see a really strong reaction to an event or a situation that under circumstances where you have a child that might be brought up under healthier environment would not react in that way because they have better resiliency skills. And oftentimes the primary emotion that might be underneath some of those, that activation or some of those big behaviors is shame.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else want to add anything to that?
Yeah.
Kevin, I'm sorry.
One other thing along those lines is a child's behavior. Kids are younger and younger exposed to pornography and different things like that. So problematic sexual behavior is a big thing right now too, where kids don't understand boundaries because they see something, they hear something, whether it's a parent, a friend, or somebody watching something that an 8, 9, 10-year-old shouldn't be watching because they can't comprehend what it is, and then they're acting those things out, whether it's at school, in the locker room, with siblings or other people. So some of those are those signs that either it's neglect or parents aren't paying attention to what they're doing, or it's something more.
Sure.
It can only be something more.
Yeah. Thank you. Shree, I'm gonna ask you because you're in the high schools. You see the stuff. What do you think are some? I mean, and you don't have to answer if you don't have an answer. But have you seen anything or something that you want to add to this that you've kind of noticed in children your age?
I think that like a lot of people I don't know. It's like he said, where a lot of people mimic behaviors that they've seen and stuff like that, and that's become more like a funny, comical thing. They're not well supported by people around them, and a lot of the reason why I think that happens is because it's regarded as a very taboo topic for parents to talk about with their children, young, and especially in school. People treat health and mandatory education like that as some I gotta do this to graduate, rather than you have to learn this for a reason, because we see what happens when people don't learn it.
Yeah. Thank you for that. I want to ask you guys. Oh, you wanted to add something? Then we'll go to the next question.
Something I was going to add is sometimes, because I grew up in an environment, so I lived experience in foster care and adopted, and lived in an abusive situation. Was if everything seems too perfect. Our family appeared so perfect on the outside. Every Sunday church attenders, everyone was always in a good mood, and there was never anything that, there was no authenticity, and everyone was always smiling, and that perfection, that facade, it was a facade, and hiding other things that were going on. Versus when you see the situation of the kid having the tantrum and the mom's crying and all, that's
a real
normal, But when everyone's well, I'm perfectly calm and nothing, and when we had to give that facade, that might be a little bit of a suspicious.
That's a good point, because behind closed doors, sometimes it's something totally different, right?
Yep.
Right?
Could I
Yeah. No,
could I
please
to that?
add, please.
So just what she said, I wholeheartedly agree with that. And speaking of signs, there may be very overt signs, some you may see. There are many times, I would say probably more often than not signs until it reaches a boiling point. And that being that, especially with the kids, we talk about resiliency. Many of them have a lot of resiliency that we might not even know of. So they become master hiders of things too. So the more they can hide it, they might, I've heard the belief that I'm helping others by either accepting this or going along with it. So I, hide it from other people because I don't want either to find out from the shame or this person to get in trouble to then make it worse, where then it gets worse for me. So many times there just isn't a sign for it up until it reaches that it's too bad.
One more thing that I also just want to add, because I talked about how when we see sort of big responses, sometimes, and if that becomes a pattern, that might kind of make us say, that's sort of interesting. I'm curious about why that might be happening. But sometimes the opposite is true. Sometimes it's an under response to something that you would expect a child to have an emotional reaction to.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, thank you. And that's what's so interesting about that. It's just so broad, right? So you just have to be paying attention, right? And just kind of be aware as much as you can. So I want to ask you, how can we tell the difference between abuse and discipline, right? Because I don't know about y'all, but I was raised, where, a little pat. Hopefully a light pat, but not normally it wasn't. And so, but that was a norm, right? Where people got whoopings, spankings, whatever you want to call it. And some people say that, is discipline, you have to do that. That's the way it has to be. How do we tell the difference? And Gina, you can answer if you want to, in regards to how do we tell the difference between discipline and abuse? Right? Because some people say spanking is abuse, right? So it just depends. But
so my head is still ruminating a little on the last, because you see what we did, right? We answered the question with every answer possible.
Yeah.
Because, my gut response initially was, you can't really always tell. Physical abuse is obvious. I don't think we have to explain that to anyone.
Yeah.
Atypical behavior is obvious. Underregulation might not be obvious. So that in of itself, it's just interesting how we landed on that we talked it through, and eventually you heard every single answer there could possibly be, which makes it difficult. With respect to what you just asked, though, I think the difference between discipline, where people get very afraid of what discipline is, abuse to me, again, is quite clear. We could define it, but discipline is being consistent and being structured and having expectations, right? It may or may not include something where you're intervening physically. I do think that there are moments when people need to be kept safe, so obviously there's that, but for the most part, discipline is structured. Discipline is consistency of, I asked this, or I said this, and this is what we want, whereas abuse is a little more erratic. Not quite appropriately directed or could come out of nowhere, and doesn't have to be physical, obviously, right?
Yeah.
The physical, again, is probably easy for us to all pick up.
Yeah, and see, I'm going to challenge that just a little bit, because I find that interesting, because, I mean, in some cases of abuse, it is super structured, right?
Sure,
it is super
sure.
consistent. It's not like, I mean,
Sure.
that's their way of life, right?
Yes.
And then the child just believes that this is it. So how do you tell, right? I mean, Kevin, do you want to add something? But thank you, Jen. I'm just really trying to ask this question in a really transparent way.
Yeah, some of the things that I've learned and seen, when it turns into coercion, you know, you're doing it for a different result than a safety thing. Or an example that somebody shared in a training I was recently in was a child acted up, so the parent disciplined him, hit the child with a wooden spoon broke, went and got another one, continued doing it, and on instead of just sending that quick message, which I'm not condoning.
Sure,
but
I get
that's
what you're
where it
saying,
gets into that next level where it becomes, from what a parent might be thinking is just discipline their child, to losing their temper, losing their control, and then it becomes abuse, because it takes that next step, you know, in whatever that process is for whatever that parent is. So, and there's a lot of other technical pieces with handprints and those things, but it gets,
Yeah.
it's a hard thing to differentiate, but usually when they investigate those things, they look for those other signs too.
Yeah.
Is this a repeated thing? Is this the only way they try to get their child to listen? Do they do it as a fear thing so their kid obeys?
Yeah.
Or is it more of like a situational thing?
And some people call discipline the doing it till they obey, right? The fear,
Yes.
right? So it's such a tough line, you know what I mean? And so, but
I think Michigan,
yeah, go ahead.
Michigan law,
Thank you, Kevin.
Michigan law does give us some guidance, right? So a parent in the state of Michigan, so of course, we always encourage other means of discipline. But Michigan law tells you can have an open hand, over clothes, spank your child. That is fine. But the minute you ball up a fist, it becomes something different. Or you use an instrument, it becomes something different.
Like a belt?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
And because a belt can leave a mark.
Yes.
If you leave a mark on a child, that can be considered child abuse. If your child goes to school, there's a belt mark or pattern mark on their arm, those teachers are mandated reporters, and they should be reporting it.
Yeah.
Even if it was a one-off, it never happened before, as a mandated reporter, they are required to report anything that looks suspicious. They weren't at your house, so they can't decide if it was only a one-time deal. So that's something to think about. One of the things we try to teach parents in parent education is when it comes to disciplining, disciplining is teaching. It's instruction. And so if a spanking is required, the thing we always encourage a parent, calm down first. Take a step back. Because if your response is to whoop or spank because you're angry, then you are emotionally dysregulated, and it can go off the rails real quick. And your response, if we're teaching kids how to navigate their emotions, parents, we example that first.
Yeah.
So if we are angry because y'all, I got a 16-year-old, bless her heart, and she be testing me. So if my response, there are times when I need to take a step back because I might want to call her out her name because I'm ticked, or I might want to pop her in the mouth because she done said something wrong. I'm just being real.
Yeah.
In order for me to be able to effectively show her how to respond in her anger, I got to first start.
Yeah.
So I'm going to step away, because you and I ain't getting along right now, and I'm gonna say something wrong, or I'm gonna do something off. So let's just part ways for a moment. You go to your room, give me your phone because you done lost it, or whatever. But then, so that would be the encouragement. Discipline, you can absolutely not mean to go off on your kid or your grandkid, and you're just angry, and your response is your response, which is why take a moment to step back. Because it really can go off the rails real quick. And it may not even be in your nature, but catch you on the wrong day in the wrong situation, and it can become a thing. And that has happened to parents.
Yeah. Yeah.
and caregivers.
And you know, I'm glad that you mentioned that too, because I mean, we could go down the whole rabbit hole of mental health, right? And how so many people right now, especially parents, are experiencing a lot of different things that are happening outside of just being a parent, right? That they are trying to regulate. And if you don't have the emotional maturity to deal through that and work through that, it can be tough. And then you do respond in that moment, but it's something that you're going through, and now you've kind of projected it onto your child, right? So I want to, on this part right here, I want to just kind of ask one more question. How does neglect impact a child's development, right, compared to physical and sexual abuse, right? Because I think a lot of times we do talk about the physical and sexual, but neglect in itself, as you mentioned that fourth one, how does that impact a child's development? Anybody want to speak to that, Debbie?
Well, you know, when I think about neglect from my personal experience is that I preferred it.
You preferred neglect?
Yeah,
okay.
Leave me alone. Like, I'll figure it out. I'll find a way home. Someone will pick me up. I mean, you know, I preferred it because I want to fly below the radar because that's safe.
Interesting.
So I know that's maybe, you know, a
No.
strange response, but that's the way I felt about it. It's like, just leave me alone. If you're giving someone else attention, just leave me alone.
That's interesting. Thank you for sharing that. Anybody else want to add anything to that?
So what we might
You go
say
next.
about something like that is that when things are volatile and we want to fly below the radar, that's an adaptation. So that's an adaptation to abuse, essentially. And the abuse, as we discussed, could take many, many different forms. But when a child learns to be small, because when they speak up, things get worse, or they get dragged into something, or they feel unsafe, or the problem becomes magnified, they learn very, very quickly, if I am small, if I am quiet, if I underreact, people may forget I'm here.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Finish
and
up- finish your
that's
thought.
just an indication of emotional neglect also, because that child has then started to internalize, I'm not important, I'm not worthy, I'm not valuable, I'm not loved, and this environment is not safe.
So sad, right? And then again, like I mentioned at the beginning, then we grow up into big people and we still do the same thing, right? We still kind of shrink and cower because of that learned behavior. Go ahead, Shri.
That's the
Thank you.
the tricky thing about neglect is that oftentimes there is that kind of idea that at least it wasn't worse. I know that I personally have met people who have described like emotional or physical neglect and they don't recognize it as such, or they don't recognize it as abuse, because in their mind abuse is strictly like physical or sexual. Like, my parents don't like hit me or beat me or anything like that, so obviously I must not be abused. But it affects people's minds in ways they don't really recognize. It affects like their resource structure, and they kind of live in this perpetual state of kind of anxiety of where is this next thing going to come from, like where is my next meal going to come from, how am I going to get transport, you know, all of these things are up in the air, but because that is their normal, they don't recognize it as something that's not healthy for them and something that has to change.
Yeah. Thank you. Did anybody want to add anything else?
Yeah. Oh, go ahead. Okay. And the other piece of neglect, you know, a lot of kids, basic needs are important for kids too. Having clean clothes that fit, because it helps them fit in at school. It helps them build self-confidence and those things. So some of those things are very important too, because it helps them learn. You know, if a child shows up to school and they had 1 hour of sleep because they heard their parents fighting all night, or something else may have happened to them, they didn't get any breakfast, they're wearing the same clothes they were wearing the same day, they're not going to be ready to learn. There's going to be a lot of disadvantages for that child when they get to school, and then other kids are going to take advantage of those situations, and it's just perpetual, you know. So it may seem like a small thing, you know, because maybe they're not physically getting abused, but a lot of other factors and things are happening in their home, so they don't have these positive things happening with them in their home, so that neglect compounds, you know. And then the only way they get attention is if they act up. You know, so they may turn into that bully even though they're the softest, kindest person, but it's the only way they get attention at home or wherever, so it can compound into much bigger things.
Yeah, or get their rage out, their anger. And then too, when you mentioned about, you know, it may not be physical, but it is the neglect part, that then does overflow into the physical, right? Because that's why you have children that have different issues that are physically, you know, impacting them due to that. Yeah. Ryan?
Kevin said exactly what I was going to say, that it bleeds over into every aspect of their life, social and physical well-being. So, well said.
So we kind of talked about, Sharon, you kind of alluded to, you know, some steps that people should take if they suspect the child is being abused. But I want to kind of talk, since we have the community here, how can community members, teachers, caregivers advocate for abused children? Because I know we talk about mandated reporters, right? I worked several jobs where I was a mandated reporter. And in my opinion, every living adult that thinks they see something is a mandated reporter in my mind, right? I just believe that, right? You don't have to have a certain degree or a certain job to care about a child. And to me, when you report something, that's because you care about that child. But if we're going to talk about mandated reporters, how can community members and teachers and caregivers help advocate for children? Go ahead.
Well, I think most now, you may know that from being in the schools, but most mandated reporters should be, once they get into that role or position, have some sort of a training with it on how to do the report. There's a number to the state that everything can be called into. And I think one of the big things is where I've seen some hesitation in reporting is the mandated reporter, or anybody for that matter, may know that they should report something. They either don't know how to do it or they're not sure if it's a form of abuse, so they're hesitant to make the report. So what I would tell everybody, if you think that it even could be, make the report. It's not your job to figure out if it is or isn't. That is left up to some of us up here. That's for somebody else, but we need you to make that report to at least get it initiated so that somebody can look at it that's qualified or has the training to go to do that. So I think it's taking that first step to make that call. Just if you see something, say something, very much. It's really about the communication, because your police, social workers, they're not everywhere you guys are community members here. You guys are in way more places than, police can't be everywhere, a social worker can't be everywhere. You guys see so much more than we ever could. So we really rely on your eyes and ears and experiences to go, hey, I think something might be going on here. And we go, okay, we should probably take a look at that. And then we can work through it from there.
Yeah. And ask questions, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not here to talk, but
it's about communication.
But ask questions, right? I mean, that's one way to help kind of figure some things out. Did you want to add anything, Debbie? No? Okay.
If it's okay, so just a point of small education here about making a report. First of all, when you make a report, it is not an accusation. It is saying, I see something that feels or seems off, and there are people I know that are made and skilled to be able to figure out if something is wrong. That's what you're doing when you're making a report. You're not accusing a family. What you're saying is, I see something that don't look right, and somebody who knows this stuff more than I do, they can go and check it out. The second thing, when you call, there is a child abuse hotline for the state of Michigan. We can make sure everybody leaves with that tonight. When you call, they're going to ask you basic questions of either it's a suspicion, a disclosure, or discovery. So you suspect something, you discovered something, or a child disclosed something to you. When you call, they're going to ask you for details. It's not about how you feel. You give exactly the details, and that's what they're going to ask for. That call goes to a space in Holland. It's called centralized intake. Centralized intake then contacts the county in which it resides. Okay? Once that takes place, those CPS workers have either 24 or 72 hours to go investigate. And it might even be 12. Could it be 12?
I think it
12.
depends on what the allegations
Yeah,
are.
if it's,
Many times, I think within 24 hours, they have to have some sort of face-to-face contact, though.
especially if it's something considered severe. Let's say a child did disclose to you and they said, I'm scared to go home. The first thing we would tell anyone, call 911. Because centralized intake can take 4 to 6 hours before it gets back to your county. So if you have a child that's at, let's say you work at the YMCA and they've been in the gym or doing whatever, I'm scared to go home when my mom or dad pick me up, call 911. 911 has a beeline to CPS and they can get things working. But the biggest thing is, if you see something, say something. We cannot have the attitude of, I don't want to mess with nobody's house. When you call CPS, let's get rid of another myth. It is not CPS's goal to take children. It is not their goal. That is the last thing they want to do, partly because we don't have enough foster homes to put children anywhere. So if CPS take a child for any and everything, they're going to be calling some of us, you got room? Because that's our reality right now. So their goal is actually to keep families together, and they will do everything they can if that's providing resources or doing whatever they need to keep those families intact. So the myth that CPS, they're just going to take kids, that is far from their goal. I work for I work with the Foster Care Review Board for the state of Michigan. And I can tell you, it is a lot for a kid to get taken.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
It is not just a very simple thing. It is a lot. And so as we think about that, it becomes important. See something, say something, don't wait.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, please.
So along the lines of reporting to centralized intake, it's an anonymous report. So that information is not released to, if you're reporting on this family, that family isn't going to necessarily know where it came from. They might figure it out. I mean, let's be honest, they might
Right, if you were the
know
one
how you
people
know
around.
the information or how
Right.
it came through.
Yeah.
But it's not given out to them. It is given out to CPS and law enforcement because we may need follow-up questions. So, stuff that just isn't collected through the centralized intake process. But the process will, like she said, ask a lot of questions. As much as you know, it might feel overwhelming doing that report initially because they're like, I don't know. Just answer what you can.
Yeah.
But remember, it can be anonymous. So.
Yeah. Jen, I want to come to you because, the type of work that you've done and do, because I want to talk about the other part of this, right? So